I'm Jim Coudal of Coudal Partners. We're a small firm. There's 6 of us. We're over just west of the river here, and we are constantly struggling to define ourselves. People ask, what do you do? And the definition that we've come up with, which is kind of a joke but also very true, is that we are a pretty traditional ad agency design firm, except we have no clients. And the truth in that is maybe part of a way to show a direction to move, at least partially, from client work to creating your own products and services that's maybe not so scary. A lot of people write us all the time. They see what we're doing. We're pretty open about the businesses we start and the failures we have and the successes we have. And when somebody writes me and says, oh, I've got this really great idea for a crocheted beer cozy, let's say, and I'm going to start it in 6 months. The problem is the 6 months. What that means is I'm afraid. And that maybe you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe you don't have to say either I'm going to be a freelancer and work for clients, or an employee and work for clients, or I'm going to be some sort of an entrepreneur. In Chicago, a couple of firms that influenced us and were going through things at the same time there's Jake from Threadless, and at the time we were working on clients. Jake was Skinny Corp, and they were doing ad campaigns for vodkas and all kinds of crazy stuff, and they came up with a kind of a silly idea for a community-based t-shirt site, which is now the monstrous and awesome Threadless. We shared a studio space for a long time with 37 Signals, and at that time they were doing interface design and web design for various corporations, and eventually got rid of all that and built Basecamp and Campfire and Backpack. By coincidence, now all 3 companies are about 3 blocks apart in a triangle. I don't know what that means. But I don't think it's anything to do necessarily with Chicago nor with our companies. I think we see this everywhere. You see Tina's doing it. I'm not, despite the flaming clients, I'm not necessarily anti-client business, but for us, the disadvantages of working for clients became bigger than the advantages. And we did a lot of work for a lot of years that we're very proud of for generous and open-minded clients. But the disadvantages, most notably not being in control of your own destiny. If somebody somewhere can make a decision about whether you're going to be in business next year, that's a bad thing to carry around with you all the time, at least in our experience. The other thing is that work begets work, and all of a sudden you start hiring more people and you're doing client work for people, and payroll's due, so maybe you start to take a project that you might not want to take, either because it's not that interesting but very lucrative, or it's very lucrative, or it's really interesting but not lucrative. And so you wind up taking work that maybe at the end of the day you're not proud of, and over time that will eat your soul. So that's a problem. And then aside from that, and maybe the most important one, is we felt, and this isn't true of everybody, but we sort of felt there's an inherent inequity in the way that creative work done on a work-for-hire basis in the design and advertising industries in North America works. And basically that is, I provide this creative for you, the client, for a fixed fee, and if the product is a humongous success, I still have the fixed fee, and the work that I've done is not compensated by the success of the product. Now, if we get a big enough fixed fee, maybe that's okay, but for us, that sort of never felt like the right thing. So I will say, however, relative to our "what are you afraid of" idea today, is that one part of client work that we managed to hold on to this day might be a way to navigate yourself towards doing your own projects. And that is, one thing about the client work that we always loved was the idea that we were working for a number of different people in a number of different industries all at the same time. So we're doing an annual report for a finance company, and we're doing a television season ticket sales campaign for a Major League Baseball team, and we're naming a new restaurant group. And as curious people who love to learn, the idea of jumping in the deep end of the pool and learning about somebody's business was very satisfying. And it also kept things from being boring. You don't want to do the same thing. Once you know how to do something, you don't want to do it again. At least we don't. And so that part of the sort of client service business was always very attractive to us because sort of, I know it's cheesy, but we love to learn about things. And so working for different clients in different industries always allowed us to work, to learn things. The other thing it allowed us to do was to sort of compartmentalize our work, in that we'd have these two people working on this client and another person working on that client. We'd have to juggle this deadline over here to get this thing done, so this thing would be done on Thursday when that went to the printer on Friday. And so when we decided that we wanted to, move at least some of our business away from client work and to our own work, instead of doing what everybody says, which is, oh, I'm going to work on that beer cozy idea in my spare time. Well, whoever said that work expands to fulfill the time allotted for it is a genius, because it certainly does. And the problem with doing a project that's important to you in your spare time is that there isn't any. And so if you're at work all day and you're saying, okay, we'll get to that at the end of the day, if the only time you're working on your projects is at 5 o'clock, then how important is the project to you? So we made a conscious effort when we started, and I'll go through a couple examples, not to say that the things we made were so cool, but more to show how maybe there's a way forward in this that could be helpful for other people. As we said, when we start the new business, whatever it'll be, and when we decided we wanted to build our own stuff, we didn't really know where we were going. We had a pretty popular website, but we didn't really know where we were going. We started this thing called jewel boxing, which is still in business. And it is a really interesting, sweet, easy way for somebody to make a short run of DVD and CD packaging. And that's not such a hot issue anymore. Nobody's burning things, but people are still buying it. So I don't exactly know what they're doing with the discs, but people are still buying it. But we don't have much effort in it anymore. But that was actually the first sort of thing that we came up with. And when we did it, we purposely said, let's treat jewel boxing like a new client. And that was a key decision for us, and it was sort of accidental, but it actually worked, because then all of a sudden we dealt with jewel boxing in exactly the same way as we dealt with Fox Sports, who was another one of our clients. Is that if jewel boxing had to have the website launched by the 10th of October or whatever it was, then that deadline was the same deadline that the client needed the basketball promotion done by, or whatever it was. And so once we made that decision, it sort of compartmentalized this self-sufficient client, for lack of a better term, and put it on equal footing with all the other clients, and also allowed us to use what little organizational skills we have to get the work done and not look at it as sort of this spare time sort of a thing. So at first it was a client that didn't pay, which was also a problem. But we had plenty of other clients who we worked for who didn't pay either, or paid very slowly. So that wasn't so unusual for us. But after a while, we started making money on jewel boxing, a little bit of money, into which it was on equal footing with some of our other clients. So we're like, okay, maybe this thing is working. This work a little bit. And then we had an opportunity coming out of jewel boxing. And we can talk about more details later if you want, but this company called The Show, which we don't run anymore. And the idea of The Show was we were going to go on tour with bands. We were going to take the multi-track master of the band's nightly performance and ship it back to a studio in Boston where it was going to be mixed and mastered. At the same time, we were producing the packaging. And so if you went to the show, or if you couldn't go to the show, you could order it online, and a couple weeks later you'd have a really great recording of a specific concert performance. And we did them in limited editions. We toured twice with the Pixies in North America and Europe, and twice with Dead Can Dance, once each in North America, and it was super successful. We sold thousands and thousands of discs, had a blast doing it, but we did stop it. And we didn't stop it because people stopped buying CDs, because it still would have worked as a digital product. And we didn't stop it because it was too difficult or it was unsuccessful. We stopped it was because the actual process of negotiating with band's management was so frustrating and such a clusterfuck that we just didn't have the patience for it. There's so many lawyers and agents and record companies involved. So it was a pretty good success for a couple of years, but it also forced us, because we were going to be in London and then in Paris and then in Dublin, and then at the same time we're in Boston and New York with the Pixies, to build a back-end system for handling orders and packing and shipping and fulfilling orders. Up until that point in jewel boxing, we were pretty much handling it with email and PayPal. And so we built this system, and we said, well, if we're building it for the show, we can make it work for jewel boxing. And once we saw that, we had the foresight or the luck to say, let's build the system in such a way that we can add another brand to it, even though we didn't necessarily have an idea for the brand at the time. So in some way, we kind of got lucky is that we built the system for the show, and the show certainly paid for itself and was a good company, but now we had this back-end system. And so we have the show and jewel boxing as clients, and with those deadlines you couldn't do the show in your spare time, because if 1,000 people in Copenhagen paid for a Dead Can Dan disc for a certain show, they want that show, and even though you told them it was going to be 2 weeks to ship, it was only the next day when they started calling to say, where's my disc? So we're sort of forced to deal once again with them as a client. So now at this point we stopped pretty much pitching new business, because we're making money off the show, the jewel boxing is chugging along. We still had a bunch of other client work, but to be fair, and maybe Brian will back me up, the other client work started to get pretty frustrating pretty quickly, because we had these 2 clients that were making money and nobody could tell us what to do. And that is empowering. And once you don't have somebody telling you what to do when somebody else tells you what to do, you lose a lot of patience for that. So in the meantime, we're trying to advertise for jewel boxing, and we find it very difficult to reach a large audience of web design and creative professionals to sell this product to. And we had still do a fairly successful website called Coudal.com, and we knew other people like Jeffrey Zeldman in New York, for a list apart, and 37 Signals, and John Gruber, and Jason Kotke. And so we got them all together, and we said, let's all put together an ad network. And so we created this thing called The Deck, so that a larger client like Nina, thank you very much, could buy an ad on The Deck, and those ads would appear on all of these sites. And that was started as much for us to find a way to advertise our products as it was to create an ad network. And now there's 55 sites and services in The Deck, and we're serving about 100 million ads every month for advertisers like Nina and Adobe and Microsoft and tons of other advertisers. Oh, there's another client. So now we got to get rid of somebody, because now we've got too many of these clients that we have. And finally, Field Notes came along, and we had all this capacity for packing and shipping. We were always looking for another product. And without belaboring it, our great friend Aaron Draplin from Portland, a terrific designer, was doing a series of little notebooks as a goofy present for all his friends. And so we sent them out. We were lucky enough to be his friend, and when we got this present, we're like, this isn't so goofy. And it was essentially the first Field Note. So one of our things is, let's not talk things to death. Like, ideas take the path of least resistance, and most often the path of least resistance is, oh, here's all the reasons we can't do that. So we tend to say, let's move quickly on this, and if we're wrong, we can just torch the whole thing. But if we're right, at least we'll have some momentum. And so with Aaron and our staff, we did a quick print run of Field Notes, had the site up in a couple weeks, made it a business. And the first day, we took an ad out on The Deck, and we blogged it, and we made 13 sales. So we're like, oh, that might be something. And now Field Notes is in 300 stores, and we sell thousands of them online. So basically, Field Notes and The Deck are our main clients. But all of this is going to say that a lot of companies would come out of a creative, who are working creative for work for hire for clients, and have an idea. Let's say you have an idea for a video game, and you have programmers and art directors at your firm, and you develop it, and all of a sudden the game gets very popular, and the next thing you know, this company that used to be a creative services firm is now a video game firm. That's one model, where you just completely create a product and you move from creative services and you become this other kind of a company. For us, we sort of stuck with the idea of having a portfolio of different things. And I don't know if it's been the right decision. If we had just stayed with jewel boxing, I'd be the CD case king, and I don't know that that would be a very good thing to be right now. But if we had just stayed with the show, or if we had just stayed with The Deck, or just stayed with Field Notes to the exclusion of other things, then we would be a notebook company, or we would be a media network, or we would be the layer tennis goofballs, or whatever. And for us, that very thing that we always loved about creative work, that idea of a variety, of satisfying your curiosity by working on a lot of different things, we've somehow managed to maintain that, even though the only clients we have now virtually, well, we have one, but the only clients we have now virtually are the ones that we own and control. So I guess maybe before I go too far into it, I think sort of the lesson is, don't do it in your spare time. Don't do the beer cozy in 6 months. Do the beer cozy tomorrow, and find a way to work it into the regular workflow of your system if you're interested in experimenting, and fail spectacularly. You know, that you put it out there and fail is sort of a fun thing. I'll say two more quick things, sort of important. Dan Gilbert is a writer. He wrote a book called Stumbling on Happiness, and he said the reason that most of us are unhappy most of the time is that we set our goals not for the person we're going to be when we reach them. We set our goals for the person we are when we set them. And I think that's really important if you think about it. At least in my life it has been. Before all of this, I worked at a big ad agency, and all I kept saying to myself is, I could be the creative director and win some Addy Awards, I'll be the shit. That's what I want to be. And I put that goal in my pocket, and I never looked at it again. And a few years later, I was the creative director when we won some Addy Awards, and I had an ulcer, and I was miserable. So I think the lesson in that is things happen quickly, and you got to be careful for what you wish for, because you might get it. Like, you need to adjust your goals as you move forward. And the other part of that, and the last part I'll say for today, and we can do some questions and answers, is that if you talk to Jake, or you talk to Tina, or you talk to the 37 Signals guys, or hundreds and hundreds of other firms that have come from a client background, and in one way or other have taken either part or all of their business into a more entrepreneurial business, in which they take the services, the crafts and the techniques that they developed on behalf of clients and put them to work for themselves. All of these people are a huge variety of people. They have different personalities, they have different taste levels, they live in different places, and I've come in contact with a lot of them, and all of them, every single one of them, all of them say exactly the same thing. And they always say it in the same words. They say, I should have done it sooner. So, what are you afraid of? Get busy. So that's my talk for today, and I hope that made some sense. And I'll be glad to answer some questions. 17 minutes, not too bad.
So when you're starting these small, when you're starting, like, say, field notes, did you make an effort to, and it doesn't sound like it, to reach out beyond your, like, immediate community to let people know about this new product, or did you start kind of small with the people you knew and kind of let it branch out on its own?
Initially, we just sort of figured that our audience at Coudal.com were probably people like us, and we dug field notes, so maybe they would dig it too. But with field notes, we actually made a conscious effort that when it started to get going, the immediate thing was to say, oh, we should get this in all these stationery and art supply stores. Like, we should, like, go everywhere where Moleskine is. And then we thought that maybe wasn't such a great idea. And then the people at Capsule, which is a men's fashion show in New York, Las Vegas, and Paris that represents tons of really cool indie brands, they got wind of field notes somehow, and they asked us if we wanted to come to the show, and we said we didn't have any money, and they said, well, if you give everybody at the show field notes, we'll give you a card table. And we said, okay. And then we went to the show in New York and found that there's this whole marketplace of really cool indie men's fashion shops that weren't carrying any notebooks, and that field notes fit really good in those stores. That just the vibe of it, that sort of American. The other thing about field notes is every product, they're all made in the U.S. The ink is manufactured in the U.S. The paper is milled. The trees are cut down in the U.S. They're stapled, cut. Everything happens in the U.S. We could do them a lot cheaper other places, but the made in the USA is part of the brand. And so this was fitting with kind of the rise of this new rise of men's fashion, and right after that, then J. Crew got a hold of them. They were just starting their In Good Company program, in which it doesn't seem too innovative now, but when they started that, J. Crew had never featured anything in their catalog that wasn't a J. Crew product. But they realized they could get sort of the halo effect of these nice brands, like a specific Timex watch, or a pair of Levi's jeans, or a Red Ball Jet shoes, or whatever it is, and field notes. So. At first we went to our core community, but then we thought, well, let's just do an end run on this thing, and we're having some luck in the men's fashion industry. Let's push it that way and see where it goes, not realizing that later that credibility was going to go a long way towards getting into the student bookstore and stationery store from the back, or a bookstore from the back door. So that was kind of a lucky break, but you have to, you get a lucky break, you got to you got to push it. So
would you say your lucky break was based on a trade almost then?
yeah. In terms of the market, it was, and it's still a very strong market, and for us internationally too. So although I think the thing about Field Notes that makes me most excited is that it is as attractive to a coffee swilling hipster in Brooklyn as it is to a mammal killing beer drinker in the UP of Michigan. You know what I mean? Like, it's a real American brand. There's nothing in here that would make either one of those guys think that it didn't belong to them in some way. Hopefully, that's the idea. Another question?
What do you think your best idea was that failed?
Which one? We've had some really doozies. Which one? All right. I'll say it was the swap meet. I had this brainiac idea, and usually, like, if I have an idea and everybody else at the firm thinks it's okay, then we're okay. But if I have an idea and everybody else thinks it's kind of strange and I push for it anyhow, then we're fucked. So this is one of those. So I had this idea that people, because we have the blog, and I'm sure Tina gets this too, is that people are always sending us stuff to look at. Here's my book, or here's this poster I did, or I made this sweater, or whatever that is. And it's like awesome to open the mail and get all this stuff that people send. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if, like, when you sent me the sweater that you made, and you sent me this 8-bit kids record that you recorded, if I just took them and appreciated them, and then I sent them back to you, to the opposite people. So we just went online and we said, okay, everybody send us your crap, and we'll match them up by taste, and we will send you back a present that somebody else sent to us. And we called it the swap meet. Very witty, M-E-A-T. But we wanted to use a raw steak as the logo. That's why we called it swap meet. Well, it worked great. Like, every day was like Christmas, because all this stuff was coming in. I think you could see the problem with this business. Is, first of all, we don't make any money, and second, the postal fees were killing us, right? So the more successful that it got, the more if it was really successful, it could have bankrupted us, you know? So we finally sort of made a revenue part of it where stuff that was really cool that we got, we went to the artists like Rod Hunting from the Post family, sent us this cool poster of an old film projector, and we're like, Rod, make 100 more of those. And then we would offer limited editions. And so we never made money on that at all. In fact, and it was so intensive of work, the curatorial work, and doing a million of one product is like a zillion times easier than doing 100 of 100 products. So we tried to match up. We still every once in a while get an email like, I sent you this porno tapestry that I made, and I never got anything back, So that, I think maybe the swap meet, maybe the swap meet could be something someday. But my other favorite was when the last pope died. This is did you ever hear anything start with when the last pope died? And I had this idea that we were going to make this website where the people who would decide who the next pope was instead of the cardinals, and so. The peoplesconclave.com, we registered it, and I got all excited about it, and then the Cardinals decided on the new guy in 10 minutes, and it didn't matter. So luckily that we didn't do that. And there was something about waiting out a boyfriend-girlfriend thing that was funny too. It was based on a Seinfeld episode where, like, Jerry and Elaine, there's this couple, and she always liked the guy, and Jerry always liked the girl, so they were waiting them out. They were waiting out until they would break up. And so we thought if you could actually do that online, that would be kind of interesting. So that you could go online and see, like, who was waiting you out, but we never did it. I don't think we had a name.
When you're kind of approaching things in this sort of create and destroy mentality, how do you maintain morale? How do you sort of continue to take risks and keep maybe how to stay competitive?
I don't know. The morale's pretty good because it's sort of fun, and like. I was speaking once and somebody asked, I had this whole question, and I did a whole similar presentation. We talked about Coudal.com, and now we're linking to everybody on the web all the time. And this lady, so sincere, asked me, she goes, how do you keep your employees from browsing the web all day? I was like, well, I don't. In fact, if they're not browsing the web all day, it's like our drug testing. We test you for drugs, and if there's none in your system, you can't have the job. But it's like sort of the opposite. It's like the opposite of that. I don't know. I'm worried. Like now we have these two things that are three things with layer tennis. We didn't really talk about layer tennis, but I didn't want to embarrass Mig because he was last year's champion. But we have these three things: layer tennis, four things with jewel boxing, and well, that's the Museum of Online Museums too. But anyhow, we have these things, and now it's difficult. I think it's more difficult now to start something new than it was before, because every time we started something new before, we could fire a client and replace them with this, and now we're sort of at full speed with these businesses that we have, and maybe we have to make some decisions, and that's sort of worrisome. On the other hand, we just knocked out some walls at our office to make a real dedicated pack and ship center for Field Notes, because Field Notes has taken over our kitchen and our conference room and everything. And so maybe we have some more bandwidth on that, so maybe we should think about coming up with another product, because now we have the system in place that it would be very easy for us to do another product. Would be very simple, both from a tech standpoint, but also from a physical pack and ship standpoint. So I don't know, we've had some nice failures too. We had this idea we were gonna do this phone in, people were gonna phone in this number. What was it? Oh, and they were gonna do a scene from their favorite movie on the phone. And then just do a monologue from a movie. We thought it was gonna be really great. And we got it, promoted the crap out of it. We sent a mailer out, did everything, and no one called. When I mean no one, I don't mean only a few, I mean no one called. The only call on the whole thing was me checking to see if it was working. So, and that later turned, we had the phone number for a certain period of time, so that later turned into verse by voice, where we asked people to read a poem. And that actually turned into a cool, for a poetry meme, it turned into a cool thing. A lot of really interesting people like Zadie Smith and other people called in and read really interesting poems. That's on our site too, at verse by voice. So we do a lot of things that aren't related to the businesses, just because it's an idea we had and we wanted to do it. So I guess that's a kind of a morale answerer, maybe.
What's the best URL that you thought for a project that never came to fruition?
Two guys at the website.com.
Okay, yeah, two guys with the website.com. By the way, where is that project? Are we moving forward on that? Yeah. I already gave it up. You did? I don't know. I have noticed you have the same problem. I have so many URLs, I don't know. And I can't, we had one actually that was a Groupon idea way before Groupon, and we never launched it. It was onecoolthing.com. We were gonna feature one thing every day, and then we let it go, and I wonder if somebody's using it or not. I don't know. I think maybe two guys with a website. What was the idea of that?
Steve and I were going to put anything you wanted on the web for 99 cents.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. You would email us, and it would be 99 cents, and we would put it, whatever it was, we'd put it on the web for 99 cents. Let's get moving on that. Yeah, let's get moving on. That's a good one. We have the domain, don't we? Okay, good. I don't want to give away. We'll have to do an NDA for that. Yes. Anybody else?
How do you sort of keep your team? How do you make them feel like they're part of the sort of entrepreneurial thing? Because for example, I work for somebody, and we do some projects that are sort of like his pet projects, like his passionate projects. Mm-hmm. But to us, it just sort of feels like another client because we're answering to him. So how do you make your team not feel like they're just answering to you?
I try not to micromanage, and I know Steve's here. I don't know, when we do for example, a new Field Notes, and we're like, oh, Steve, maybe we should go to a county fair, and last summer, let's make a film about it. And then Steve and Daniel, our intern at the time, disappeared, and I never even saw the project again until it was done. So I don't, once in a while I'll change the kerning on a headline, but I don't, generally, we're all pretty involved, and pretty much every idea is okay. We used to have this thing, we used to call it the book, where we didn't actually have a book, but the idea was if you had this crazy idea for a new business, and we weren't going to do it, we'd say, oh, that one's for the book. And so now we got really good at knowing that. So anybody's idea can go in the book, because we're never going to do them. So, I think it's, there's enough work to go around, and I think pretty much everybody wants to make their lives easier. So if somebody comes up with an interesting way to make the shipping system software better, or a blog post that sells Field Notes or something, yeah. Maybe I'll have to talk to people who work with me instead of me on that. But
I think the size of the company has a lot to do.
yeah, we've been bigger and smaller. There's only about 6 or 7 of us now, and it feels like just the right size. there's somebody said, I don't know if it was Bezos or somebody said, if you can't feed your team with 2 pizzas, your team is too big. I thought that's kind of an interesting way to look at it, because you start to get bigger, then there's all these other things that start to happen. So, but that doesn't mean it's right for everybody. It just means for us, this is the size. And maybe if we had been more aggressive and grown quicker, we could be more successful and happier. I don't know, but this felt like the right thing it has felt like the right thing for us. So.
We have one more.
Last one?
You mentioned something about when you have an idea and everybody's kind of shaking their heads, the CEO that's like, it's a bad idea, but sometimes you do it anyway.
Yeah.
How do you make decisions when there's a lot of risk involved? So if you're about to invest,
Luckily, I don't have ideas with a lot of risk involved.
you have to figure out how to do the fulfillment of field notes, and there's got to be some kind of investment in that.
Yeah, but that wasn't one. Everybody agreed on field notes right away. We knew, we got that thing from Aaron, and it was, I swear to God, I was on the phone with him in 10 minutes, and we had a business started 13 minutes later, and we just knew it. You just knew it. You saw it, and you saw the future. So there was and the investment was just the first printing run, so a few $1,000s for the first printing run, It wasn't a big one. Most of the ideas that involve risk, the risk is the time you waste, I guess. I think you gotta keep swinging. And I think wasting time, we invented layer tennis. We know about wasting time. So, I think wasting time is an important part of the whole process, because when you're screwing around is when you have the good ideas. When you're on deadline, right, in PHP to get the client's employee server up by 4 o'clock, you are not going to have a good idea at that moment, although if you procrastinate on that, that's a really good time to be creative. Like if you have a huge thing hanging over your head, that's a great time to start something else. At least I've found. I don't know why though. So.
And I guess our last question, it's only fair because you asked all of us this, but what are you afraid of?
Should I say the same joke I said before? No. I'm afraid of not being able to keep this going in a way that's fun, I guess. Oh, that's kind of cheesy. I should have prepared something. Outside, I said I was afraid of widths instead of heights, but I don't know that that's true. So, the afraid thing is sometimes when people say that they're afraid of something, what they mean is they don't understand it. And so maybe I think I'm afraid of becoming not willing to understand a new thing. I'm afraid of not being curious. And I got these kids too, that helps keep you curious, but I'm afraid of playing bridge and golf, I think, sort of. How about that? Thank you very much.
So Jim, how can we get a hold of you? How can everyone follow up with you?
Coudal.com, and pretty much you can get to everything we do off of there. The new field notes, these are the American Tradesman Edition, are cool. They come with this awesome carpenter's pencil and instructions on how to sharpen it properly. We have subscriptions available. We do a limited edition 4 times a year, so you can subscribe for a whole year, or you can just buy them individually. That's fieldnotesbrand.com. If you've got a product that you've already built that needs to be advertised, go to the deck, and you can just write jim@coudal.com, and we'll go from there. But don't start sending junk, because we're not swapping anymore. Or send the junk, but just don't expect something back. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Jim.
Thanks, Nick.